It is my great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Reverend Kathryn McDowell. Reverend Kathryn has served as a minister of science of mind for 32 years in Arizona and California. She began attending Science of Mind services in 1983 at First Church of Religious Science in Phoenix. Reverend Kathryn loves teaching, most of all, and her joy and passion lies in teaching the wisdom of the ages as presented in the science of mind and spiritual living through her sermon, classes, spiritual retreats, and one-to-one practitioner counseling. She has been blessed with a broad arena for this work in the Science of Mind centers, Unity churches, and New Thought seminars in California, New Mexico, Iowa, and Arizona. Reverend Kathryn is an engaging speaker, I can attest to, a playful instructor, and a constant spiritual companion who encourages her students to go even deeper into their truth studies and to stay with the one. Please help me welcome Reverend Kathryn McDowell.
Hi, kids. Good to see some faces I haven't seen in 100 years or so. So I'm really happy to be here with you, and we'll see what we can learn from one another. Okay. I was really excited to see that the theme for the month was "And Still We Rise," and so I grabbed the first thing that popped into my mind, and it has to do with bread. My mother was a bread baker, and the thought about something rising made me think of that. So we're going to learn all about bread today, and maybe some more, maybe some more. All right. So the first thing that I thought about, oh, and that's why I said for our title of today is "At Yeast We Live." And Nicole said, "Is that right?" I said, "Yeah, it's yeast, not least." Okay. I couldn't believe that I came up with that because yeast is yucky. Yeast is germy. Yeast smells bad. It looks horrible. And sometimes we even get it on our skin and it doesn't feel so shiny bright. So let's see if we can make something out of all of that, okay? One of the first things to realize is that yeast can last for years and years and years. In the dry form, it can sit there just like any kind of grain of any kind. And so it stays there forever. Kind of like how we feel sometimes when we want to get out of a situation, but we stay there forever to do what needs to be done. Now, if you add just a tiny little bit of sugar to it, it gets foamy. And that sugar it made me think of Mary Poppins, with a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. But it needs to stay foamy and warm. Heat makes a difference. Heat makes it work better. And when we're through mixing with it, we have to keep it covered so it stays warm. So what is that all about, and what in the world does that have to do with with life? Everybody's going, yeah, what in the world is she talking about? Well, the good news is I am the one member of my very large family who does not like to cook and cannot stand to hear about a recipe. My sister will call and she'll say, and then we do this, and then we put that in. And one day I finally had to tell her, I said, Pat, you're telling me a recipe is like me telling the joy I get out of genealogy. And this guy in the 1800s, who was our 18th great grandfather, it's just blah, blah, blah to me on recipes. I was always enthralled with my mother's bread baking. It was what she did. And in addition to raising 9 children, and raising a lot of cousins that Dad brought in from time to time, and woebegons from off the street, she baked a lot of bread for a lot of people. She baked bread sometimes 3 times a week with anywhere from 3 to 6 loaves at a time, and it was just eaten, 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 and everybody loved it. They loved the taste of it. They loved the smell of it. And I always felt guilty when she was constantly having to knead it. We didn't have the whipping machines at that time. And I still have a wooden bowl that's about 18 inches in diameter that she would knead all of that in with the flour and everything. It was a ritual and it was a necessity at the same time. It was required for our sustenance along with all the other farm food that we ate. Oh, and by the way, the meadow behind me is actually a cornfield, now grass. And up above on the ridge is the house where we grew up in until we moved to Arizona. So I thought I would have that here today also for my mom. But the idea was you had to mix all of these different things together, and each of them in their own way didn't seem very inviting. The flour, okay, we had to make flour with the yeast and the sugar were always on hand. They were in some container or another. After she did the kneading, the constant kneading, and got it all out of the air out of it, and the bubbles stopped, and then she'd make a perfect little curve for it in the bowl and put a little bit of flour on top just to keep it soft and dry. And she would let it sit for a while, and the yeast went to work. And the yeast blew up what she had just made so perfect. And so she had to knead it again and to get all of the bubbles out of it. And then she would break it up into pieces and make a roll of each one and put it in a pan and put a little bit of flour on the top, a little bit of butter on the top, and then let it rise again until it looked like it was ready to go in the oven. And then it went in the oven. And then it came out and she put a little more butter on the top and let it cool off. And then we could slice it. Are you going to have a better appreciation for that sandwich you have next time of what it took for it to get there? So many different, and that was just a loaf of bread. That wasn't even rolls and other bready kind of things that take place. A lot of work. And I remember one time when I was, maybe seventh grade, eighth grade even, and she was doing her bread thing, and we were supposed to go to school, and I was watching her do it, and I loved watching her prepare for that bread. And all of a sudden, we heard a sound, and I had missed the bus. And so mother had to wash her hands and cover the bread in the bowl and drive me to school so I would get there on time. It was walking distance after a fashion, but she knew I had to get there on time. So paying close attention to the work that she put into it was one thing. But when I started studying about what is bread really about and what is the yeast really about, I suddenly got a different thought about what the yeast is, and therefore at yeast we live, because it's that continuous activity of going into things and working them and working them. How many times have you done something and you thought, okay, that's done, and you walk away and it comes up again? Why isn't it done yet? I thought I handled that. Well, it's kind of like mother making 3 uh, preparations of bread for harvest hands and kids and in-laws and outlaws. There's things in life that we can do again and again and again, and they're ready until they aren't. Many things we can't do just once. Golly, kind of like spiritual studies and spiritual practice. But I thought I had that handled. Well, here it is again. Apparently, I'm not done with it yet. We go through that in our classes all the times. But but I did my affirmation, I did my treatment, I saw my practitioner. Well, but you're still thinking about the problem, so it's still there, isn't it? We want it to be so easy. We want to open the plastic container and take out the bread already baked and already sliced. Or we want to go buy a sandwich that somebody else did the whole thing for us. Next thing you know, we're going to be hiring people to eat for us because it's too inconvenient to have to do it ourselves. Life is a little more encompassing than a one and done. It takes all of what we are, it takes our best intentions, it takes our endeavors and our willing to work at it. And to sometimes decide I didn't do that quite right, so I have to go back to it. Oh, and then there's the bubbles that show up in life. There's those things that we didn't plan on. We didn't think that they would happen, and yet there they are. Does this sound like bread making? Any of the rest of you make bread? Whether you whip it or press it, there's a lot that goes into it, and you need it more and more and more. And so, what are we doing with all of this? The bread itself surprises us sometimes because we've got it all nicely mashed down. And then when you leave it to warm, the bread gets big again. And we punch it down some more to get rid of the bubbles. So many bubbles in our lives. We have to put it in pans. We have to prep the pans. We have to oil the pans. We have to make sure it doesn't stick in the pan. How do we work with that in life? There's been things in my life that I really just so wanted to be done with. I just stopped doing them. I just stopped doing them. And you know what? The situation that involved that came back again. I thought I let that go. Well, there's some things in life we can't just let go by stopping thinking about them. This is an interesting thing. We talk about what you think you create in your life. But there's also that part in us that's the soul part of us, that's the true yeast. That's what it is that truly rises. And there are things that rise up in us that need to be dealt with, Kathryn. I'm very good at putting things off. I'm very good at putting things off. And so if they aren't done, they aren't done. Am I willing to go the distance, to do what it takes for the rising and the falling, the blending and the mixing, the feeding, the sustenance that bread comes with? Am I willing to do that with every area of my life? Am I willing to rise like the yeast does so that it can indeed sustain me? That my work sustains me just like bread feeds me. We don't want to think about those things sometimes. I personally have periods of time when by golly, I just want somebody else to do it. I was the eighth kid. Somebody should have been taking care of me because I was the little one younger than me. And there were times when I just had to do it on my own. I had to play by myself. I had to fix things myself. Just about the time I was going to count on my older brothers to do everything, they all went in the military. So there we were again, just us little kids. I often speak of my Aunt Laura, and she was so precious to me because, when mom didn't need an eighth kid, Aunt Laura needed a second one. I have one cousin from Aunt Laura, but sometimes I needed more of mom than she was able to give. And so I had an Aunt Laura. Sometimes I need more than I'm able to give. And so I have to go ask for help. I have to count on a friend to just listen to me, be grumpy, be scared, be uncertain, be angry. And working with that is just like popping the bubbles out of the bread dough, getting it prepared for the oven, for the real cooking of it, for the final preparation of it, just like we as individuals need that final preparation now and then. Wonderful if we can do it alone. I'm a good do it alone girl until the day that I'm not. And then I need at least a listening ear, if not a helping hand. What do we do when we get into that position where we need to know that the work that we came to do is really going to produce that wonderful smelling bread? We all love the smell of bread. One of my cousins said, I wish somebody would learn that you should make a room freshener that smelled like fresh bread. That would be a big seller for many people. How do we have that happen? I was looking at, the bread of life of Jesus, the bread of life that, we embody, the communion of, I am the bread, I am the life, and then drink this, for me. The Bible tells us, for the bread of God is that which comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. And Jesus said, you will always have this. They said, how do we get this bread all the time? And he said, it's always with you because I am always with you. And whoever comes to me will never be hungry. And whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. And so if we embody that, here we've just finished Easter. If we embody that the Spirit, the essence, some call it Jesus, some call it Spirit, if I really get that it's always here, that the bread of life within me is always prepared, I can never go hungry. I might get a little worried in my human physical mind, but the truth is, all is well. And that's been a mantra of mine for most of my life. All is well. And if it looks like I'm running out of bread, I'm not, because the whole mixture of it still lives in me. The ability to take access of it lives in me. And I usually find out that when I think there isn't enough, the problem is I think there isn't enough. There's always enough. It's always available. And I don't have to wait for me or anyone else to make it happen. What I need to do is believe it's already happening. It is always happening. But we get sidetracked, don't we? When I was doing this research about bread, because I'm sorry, Mother, I didn't know all the details, okay? But I discovered the things that sidetrack us, and I'm very good at getting sidetracked because they were, talking about the bread of life and so on. So people were asking questions about Jesus and about the symbols and so on. I never thought of these things. They wanted to know what Jesus's favorite color was. Excuse me? There's more to the story. There's more to the story. So someone decided he liked royal blue because that's the color we often see associated with him. We made that up in our minds, you want to know. And then the other one that I liked so much was, what zodiac is Jesus? Did you ever wonder about that? Now listen, if it was in December when he was born, that'd make him a Sagittarian, correct? Okay, all of you who know all those details. However, this cracked me up. It said Jesus kind of liked fishes, the loaves and the fishes. And so they finally decided Jesus was a Pisces. I'm sorry, that just tears me up. And then the final one was, someone was talking about communion. And how many communions do you have to do before you've eaten a whole Jesus? If it's the bread and the life. I'm sorry. And then somebody went and calculated the gallons of blood in a communion cup that would equal a human body. I don't understand that, but they did. Okay. So the thing is, what am I looking for to satisfy my hunger? Whether it be bread or whether it be the life of God or it be my own awareness and goodness and my conscious understanding of what the gift of God really is. How would that work? So one of the verses in the Bible, it says Jesus provided an answer to how to satisfy any kind of spiritual hunger. The first is find God's purpose for you. And many of us are constantly working with that, whether we have a vision group or we're doing treatment on it or we're in a program that's giving us our purpose. And the other one was to get into the word, capital word, and stay there. Ernest Holmes says, he says, stay with the one and never deviate from it, never leave it for a moment, because to desert the truth in the hour of need is to prove that we don't know the truth. The fourth part is keep an eye on boredom. When we get bored, we get distracted by crazy questions and thoughts and uncertainties. It's like, oh my God, how am I going to deal with this? It's usually because I'm not busy enough doing it. So keep an eye on boredom. By all means, sidestep any unhealthy cravings. Sometimes that craving is, get this off my back. Sometimes that craving is, why isn't somebody else doing it for me? I need to find somebody to fix it. A lot of cravings in our life, and many of them very unhealthy. Or the one of, I can't figure this out now, so I think I'll go eat. That gets to be an hourly routine, by the way, as some people have discovered with the COVID sequestering. And without delay, respond quickly to the urgings of the Holy Spirit. Respond quickly. Those nudges that we get, those things of, this isn't working, what am I going to do? And the message comes and, well, you could do this. Oh no, that's not going to work. And we have all the things that won't work in our minds. And instead of being totally immersed in what was the message in the first place, again, in the visioning process, what we're doing is we're not asking God to show us a vision. It isn't that we're trying to have a mental equivalent all on our own and dream it up, which is just a visualization. But what happens is we're trying to see what we have never seen before. That's what the vision is about. It's not about a new idea. It's about a way of being. And so how do I envision myself, my whole self, in being totally nurtured, totally fed, totally sustained, totally capable of doing whatever it is that I'm to do? And maybe it's to bake bread. Maybe it's to sell it. Maybe it's to feed it by hand to those who are most hungry. What is it that each of us has come here to do? What in the world is it that allows us to rise? There are things in our lives that feel like yeast. It's icky. It smells funny. It's horrible. And I don't want to have anything to do with it. But it is a yeast that will make us grow. It is a yeast within us that will help sustain us as well as other people. What is it that we're pushing away? Because we can't imagine how it could possibly be any good for us. And even in the midst of our kicking and screaming and denying and fear, still we rise. Still we rise. So what is it within each of us, each of you, each part of me that allows me to finally surrender? Yes. Be what I came to be. I don't know what I'm putting in the pan some days, but I know that there's a form, there's a substance, and there's a sustenance that makes life worthwhile. So let's do that. Let us do that and stop worrying about whether or not Walmart sells communion wafers. Join me in prayer. This is this wonderful, wonderful life that we've been given, that we stepped into consciously or unconsciously. And this beautiful life has everything it needs and everything I need to rise to a greater awareness, to a greater livingness, to a greater givingness. Oh, let me remember what it means to be warm and to rise just like bread. And so this day we dedicate ourselves in a brighter and stronger way to be that truth of spirit that is the very nature of our being, and no longer struggle with it, no longer wonder about it, no longer worry about it, but let it be the truth in everything that we do and say. And so it is.